Pretty excited today to be sitting down with Gabriel Kahane, the filmmaker behind the amazing feature film Benji's Hour. I'm just going to read a little excerpt from the Calgary International Film Festival. So they wrote, written on an NYC subway at age 15 and shot in true indie style 6.5 years later. Gabriel Kahane's deeply personal feature debut chronicles a lawbreaking teenager, Justin Mark, forced to work at a wig shop owned by the warm-hearted Susan Catherine Curtin. There, he befriends an unstable cancer patient, Heiser, who irreversibly alters the course of his life. And they don't give you all of the credit that you deserve there in that short little write-up. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but you not only directed this film, you wrote this film, served as one of the producers of this film, edited this film, and was amazing in the supporting role of Eric. That's a lot of hats.
It is a lot of hats, and yeah, I'm the only produced by credit. So in terms of like an operational role, it was just kind of me. Now we have a lovely EP who's helping it get distribution ready as well. Yes. So it's nice to have a little bit of support there as well.
I mean, obviously that is challenging, wearing so many hats at once. Was that mostly a result of the indie nature of the film, or do you enjoy kind of having your hands in a little bit of everything, or what does that look like?
I mean, I absolutely enjoy having my hands in everything, and I think that at the end of the day, a director's job is to have their hands in everything. But and I'm an editor. I mean, in terms of the fact that I've edited my own work, so I really enjoy the process. But there certainly was a certain amount of it that was simply out of necessity. So if I could have had another operational producer, I absolutely would have. If I could have had an editor that, then I would have obviously edited with them. That would have been lovely as well. An assistant editor would have certainly been fantastic. But at the end of the day, the film is really kind of what it is, I think, because of the fact that it was just, get this thing made with, otherwise limited resources. And so I went up there to do like second unit DP work as well, after kind of get some B-roll shots of the town. So when you have someone, myself, so kind of intimately acquainted with every little part of it, I feel like, and I correct me if I'm wrong, because you watched it, it might feel kind of personal. And I think that might be a slight byproduct of just kind of wearing all those hats.
Yeah, totally right. Your personal stamp, I think, is all over that film. And this is your first feature film, and you're only 22, is that?
I'm 23, right? But yeah, I'm
23, okay.
I'm a youngin', and we shot principal photography when I was 21. So it was, and like you read, that first draft was actually written on the subway when I was quite young.
That it goes without saying that having a first feature film at 23 years old is quite the accomplishment.
Thank you.
Yeah, and obviously you've had a short or two play some festival runs as well. So despite only being 23, right, you've been involved in film for a long time. I actually had the opportunity to watch a couple of your earlier shorts, which was kind of fun, right? Yeah. I definitely see some like thematic connections between some of the earlier work, but then obviously you've grown so much as a filmmaker as well. But what was it that got you into making movies as a young teenager, essentially?
Yeah, great question. I think so. I've never gone to film school or never had formal film training, but I do come from an acting, training background. So I've always been involved in the arts. And when I was young, like to the age of 9, I think I was, screwing around with, my VHS camera, and it slowly got more and more serious. And, then went to the DSLR, figuring stuff out. And then I was 14 in high school at LaGuardia High School, which is a very artistically charged environment, right across the street from Juilliard, who, funnily enough, our lead went to Juilliard, so a little bit of circularity there. I decided to write this short film that I think maybe a trailer is up on my website, To Henry. And
Yes.
it was like I made it just with an elderly neighbor of mine, a DSLR, an iMovie.
Yeah.
It was about as kind of limited you can get. But I watched it and I showed it to some people, and they were really moved, and I felt moved too. And I figured that, oh, okay, so this is it. And then the year after that, I made my first, quote unquote professional short, which is Must Be This Tall to Ride. And I was 15 then. I might have started writing it at 14. I don't really remember, to be honest. And that went to a bunch of festivals, which was really lovely. And I kind of went around touring that. And ever since then, it's just been nonstop making short films. And I think that the thing I love so much about film is the fact that it's everything. It's writing, it's photography, it's music, it's pacing, it's acting, it's working with people. It is so stimulating. And I think as an individual, I really need stimulation, especially in an artistic sense. And film certainly provides that.
Yeah, and when you fill 27 different positions on a project, that certainly helps as
a
well.
little too stimulating.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about Benji's Hour. Definitely a powerful film. I was certainly moved by it, and I think, and this goes with Must Be This Tall to Ride, your previous short. I think what stands out to me is your ability to craft characters that are not just complete cookie cutters, but are kind of living and breathing outside of like a traditional stock character, right? And I think that a lot of that is through your dialogue. What I was seeing when I was watching Benji's Hour is how every line seemed purposeful. It was never like, it never seemed like you or any of the characters were trying, right? It seemed very natural. And I was just wondering if you could talk about your writing process and how you write that dialogue.
Absolutely. And yeah, I definitely get, positive notes on my dialogue in particular. So that's a theme I've noticed. It's a great question. I think that people are inherently flawed, regardless of how lovely a person might be. We are human beings and we're flawed by nature. And that's one of the things that, is lovely about human beings. And I find that, like the word you used, cookie cutter, when you try to put people into a box, you get this kind of very formulaic stock character, and you lose some of the magic of what it means to be a person. So, a lot of writers start out with like very specific outlines of, okay, like this is the beginning, middle, end. I'm gonna hit my 7-act structure here. I'm gonna write my character breakdowns, and then I'm gonna write the first word. And I'm not that writer. I oftentimes, sometimes it'll start with a song. I'll be listening to a song and I'll have an image in my mind, and then I'll just kind of branch off of that image. Sometimes it'll be an idea, a concept, an overarching theme that I want to explore, and then I'll start with a first scene and then just go from there. I think Benji's Hour was really I came up with the setting, and I came up with the kind of general idea of dramatic teenager coming of age film, and then from there I just wrote the first scene and it just kept going. But the film I'm working on now, my second feature, it happened like a little differently. I started writing a script based off of a location, and then I got like 30 pages into that script, and I saw where I was going with it, and I was like, I don't think this is that interesting. So I put it aside for a second and I thought about, what I wanted to say. And I actually ended up taking 15 pages of that script at the beginning, changing some major things, and then writing off of that just based upon the fact that I kind of knew what I wanted to explore. So I'd say I'm a very kind of right by the seat of my pants
Yeah.
type of a writer. And in terms of dialogue, maybe there's maybe I have a slight edge because I've read so much dialogue as an actor, and you really know when something feels authentic or not.
Interesting.
And I think I also just give myself a lot of freedom to just write and not really worry. And so conversations are, I never plan out the length of a scene in conversation. Sometimes it'll start and it'll be like 3 lines, and that's the scene, 1 line, no lines. And then other times I'll end up with a 5 page scene of dialogue. And then, of course, writing is rewriting. So I tweak things, but I love to let my actors roll with it. And there are some scenes I'm like, please, let's stick to the words. And but I'd say for the majority of it, I'm like, if this doesn't feel right to you, and there's something similar that kind of gets the point across that you want to say, go for it. Because oftentimes, I mean, the script is very close to what you see dialogue wise, but there's definitely some improv in there and some really amazing improv. I'd say Curtin did the majority of
Oh my
the
gosh.
improv.
Oh my
She's
gosh.
just so funny.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Captain Curtin.
Yeah.
I mean, she played a supporting role, but
Hmm.
every scene that she was in,
Yeah.
she just stole the show.
Yeah, she did.
She was phenomenal. What was it like? And most
Sure.
people would probably know her from her role as Dustin's mother on Stranger
Hmm.
Things, but yeah, what was it like working with her?
Yeah, it was amazing. I have nothing but positive things to say about Kathy. She came on through our casting director. They're friends, and the casting director Amy Gossels thought to send her the script and that she might be good for this character. And I mean, luckily for everyone involved, she just read it and just loved it. And so we hopped on a call, and she was like, "I accept," and I'm like, "Oh my God, fantastic!" And it's so lovely with Kathy because if I could say one character that is closest to what I had in mind when I wrote the script, that is like it's Kathy, and as
Yeah.
playing Susan, I mean, it is exactly what I had in mind. If I could pull up the character description, you'd be like, "Oh, okay." And it's just incredible because if you know how much improv she did that didn't make the film, I could put together a whole other movie
Yeah.
with Catherine Curtin's improv. I think maybe my favorite improv line of hers is when they're in the wig shop, and she says, "Okay, like let's take a seat," and Benji doesn't sit, and she's like, "Oh yeah, because yeah, it's so much healthier to stand. Thank you for that." I'm
Yeah.
just like that. I didn't write that. Like I
Oh
wish I
my
read that.
gosh. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just also, I think what's so special about Catherine is, I mean, she might not be like a household name, but she's worked so much and really high profile stuff, Orange is the New Black, Homeland, Stranger Things, and then, other movies, Bad Education, Worth, etc. But she is, despite being really respected, within the industry, she is so open to taking risks and hopping on smaller projects with, unproven talent like myself. I mean, you can watch my shorts, and there was a concept trailer for Benji's Hour that I sent around that I'm proud of, and it's not public now, but I'm happy to send it to you. So you can have like the basic level of trust. Okay, this person knows what they're doing. It's not going to be an amateur.
She was phenomenal for sure. Yeah. Um, so obviously you mentioned how you were able to connect with Kathy through your
Mhm.
casting director, and you also alluded to the very indie nature of the production
Yeah.
itself. Can you just expand a little bit more on how that process worked? How did you get this film
Yeah,
made?
absolutely. I mean, it was, when you think of passion project, this is that. Because I originally I made this concept trailer for it, and I was happy with how that came out, and so I spent about a year trying to get proper financing for the film. I think originally when I was really younger in the game, I was like, yeah, let's make this with like $1 million, 1.5 million or something like that, which would have been like a totally appropriate budget for the script.
Hmm.
And then I was like, okay, that might not happen. Then I went down to like 800 grand, and I spent about a year shooting for that number, and I got into some pretty big doors and had some cool conversations. But there were two things that were really going against me. A, it was the very start of COVID, which everyone was kind of holding onto their money a bit tighter, which is
Yeah.
very natural when things are unsure. And then B, first time director with no kind of financeable talent, as one would say. So I was on a call with this really, really famous producer. I don't know if you're familiar with Anne Carey. She
Mhm.
did okay, yeah, did The American and 20th Century Women. Can You Ever Forgive Me? I mean, high profile films, and she's
Mm.
been involved in a lot of other high profile films. And I literally just I know someone who knows her, and so I asked if she could hop on a call with me just to give me some advice as a young filmmaker new to this kind of feature film process. And I told her, I was like, I'm trying to get 800 grand, but it's not really happening. And so I'm trying to figure out right now, do I make this with the amount of money I have in my bank account and the small amount of money I've been able to raise, or do I wait another year and try again? Because it's shot during the summer, so we shoot it this summer, the next summer. There's nothing really in between. And she said, rightfully so, you can die an old man waiting for 800 grand. Couldn't be more right. She said,
Yeah.
make it with what you have and surround yourself with people who believe the impossible is possible. And I was like, you're absolutely right. So there was a 3-month period where I kind of looked at the resources I had in pocket. I won't disclose the budget because I want people to watch it with a fresh mind. I can tell you after.
Yeah.
But the production value is huge for the budget, mainly because we shot in Utica and they just bent over backwards to accommodate us. There were maybe like 8 cop cars in the film, didn't pay a penny. The ambulance, nothing. Most of the
Wow.
locations, nothing. I mean, they just wanted to help. And so I had that in my pocket. I knew that I had those resources. And I also had, a lot of really talented crew members who really wanted to support the vision, despite, it really being for the art. And I think, also during COVID, people were bored and wanted to work a bit too, which couldn't have hurt. And so I looked at all these resources I had and I said, you know what? I think I can do this. It's going to be a lot harder than, doing it with, a proper budget, but I need to make this and I don't want to lose all my momentum. So I made the decision to make it. And obviously the budget did balloon a bit as one would expect. But but in the end, the only thing that I think was sacrificed is I don't think much was sacrificed in the actual film. I think in some ways the lower budget actually helped it be more focused and on the story instead of all the toys. And you still get the toys, you still have nice visual effects sequences and all that. Another major thing I had going was really talented post production in color, visual effects, and sound mixing. I think, I guess to sum it all up, not to be too long winded about this, is like when you're really passionate and straightforward and saying, listen, like we've got very little money here, and it's totally. And I started off every single Zoom call with potential collaborators with this being like, this is how much I can pay you, if and if you can't do that, that is no hard feelings. I'm not trying to insult you. This is just what I'm working with. And when you're that straightforward, and the script is good, and people like the work, I think people are really willing to just give you a chance. Maybe not the industry kind of gatekeepers like the financiers and the executives, they're less chancy. But the people who frankly make films happen are far more amenable to hopping on stuff that is unproven, just because maybe you find that like lightning in a bottle. And I was incredibly lucky to have a lot of really, really talented people, and I obviously did my best at all times to kind of follow all the industry guidelines. Even though we were on like a very low budget SAG agreement, we still tried to follow their higher budget rules in terms of like turnaround and meals and etc. So it's kind of like it's finding this balance between um, realizing the scale you're working at, but also trying to work at that higher standard, like gun safety. I mean, we didn't use any real guns in the film, but there are prop guns in the film. Those were taken very seriously. So I guess I feel like I've gone very long-winded on this, but it's just a matter of like willing it into existence. And I frankly, I lost 11 pounds in 3 weeks, just out of stress. Like that's the most amount of weight I've ever lost. So it was tough.
No, I think that piece there is so valuable for filmmakers who are starting out and feel like it's an impossible journey, right? If you believe in yourself and you're honest and you just keep putting it forward, right, you can be getting your world premiere at these Oscar qualifying festivals, which is pretty cool.
And Calgary is such a cool festival.
It is. I mean, obviously, TIFF in Canada gets all the attention, and that is of course an amazing world-class festival. But SIFF is also a brilliant growing festival too. I just want to switch gears slightly and kind of move my formal interviewer hat to the side and put on just my film lover hat. And I wanted to ask you a question, and we'll try to avoid too many spoilers here. But when I was watching this film, there were a couple motifs that stood out to me, at least, and you can tell me if this was intentional or if perhaps I'm reading into things a little bit too much. But the two things that kept coming back were water and trains. And
you got it.
In the final shot, there's a little bit of a combination there. I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
I'm so glad you picked up on that. I mean, you're right on. Those were, I'd say, the two major motifs in the film, and I'll happily speak to this. As you can see, I'm currently in the process of moving into a new apartment, but there's right there's I think two pictures that both include water, and so I'm very moved by water as a metaphor for life. There's a really lovely Buddhist quote that talks about how a wave is also water, and how when it moves from its smallest point to its highest point to the shore, it's not like it's starting and ending, it's just returning back to its natural state, which is water. And so I think that water is this constantly moving, cyclical, always fluid thing, as is life. And I think that especially when you're coming of age, which I like to say is not a process reserved just for the young, because it's we come of age at all different times, and at all different paces. It often feels kind of like very choppy water, and I can say though that despite the fact that I was conscious of water as a motif, and obviously with the first scene with the cliff jumping and all of that, it was on my mind. I didn't realize how major of a motif it was until after I finished the film. And then, so I would have to think more about, I'd say, the meaning of that. So you might have just as good of an answer as me, to be quite frank. But then the trains, that was a very intentional motif. And there are some Easter eggs too, like at one point, if you go back, he's reading a comic book, and he's running alongside a train. Or one of our graphic designers made that. So
Oh,
the
wow.
train, and then the Christmas tree. There's the train,
I
which
did
actually
catch
is,
the Christmas tree. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's the same exact brand of
Yeah.
train as the
Oh,
train in the
wow.
last shot, which was
Oh.
just dumb luck. And I'd say trains are a very intentional motif, and that I can speak on more specifically. It's just movement, and the idea of being trapped in this. I mean, Utica is a lovely town, and we actually never state directly the town. I think there's one piece of signage or two that might indicate it, but I'm basically, it's central upstate New York, and some of these towns are not as economically prosperous. And I went to college for a couple of years at the Hamilton College, which is very close to Utica. And while it's beautiful, the nature, I mean, it's really pretty. There is also this feeling, especially in the winters, of like kind of going nowhere. Like, this is rough. And I think that Benji is at this point in his life where he's got all this trauma, all these skeletons behind him, and he's not 100% sure what's in front of him. And so I think train signifies both movement along his track, his life track, and also an escape, and this promise of something other, this kind of getting away and leaving everything in the rear view. So you spot on both of those.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I appreciate that explanation, because I was curious, and that I find it so fascinating that, yeah, that idea of movement. I mean, both with water and the trees. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's that element
Yeah.
of movement, and I'm absolutely going to butcher this quote, but you brought up in interactions between Benji and your character, actually mostly
Mm-hmm.
this philosopher Soren,
Yeah.
what is it, Kierkegaard?
Kierkegaard,
Yeah, yeah,
Kierkegaard.
yeah. And he has this quote, I know, that's something like, you can only view life uh, looking backward, but you can only live life
Oh
moving
yeah.
forward. Something like that, right? So
Life can only be
yeah,
understood backwards, but it must be lived
yes,
forwards. Yeah.
yes, that's it.
You're you're I never even made that connection with the trains, but that's
Yeah,
100% right.
yeah. Are you into the existential philosophy, or was that just kind of a back and forth humorous opportunity? Or
Great. I really love, I really feel like you got the movie. It's both. It's really both. I love Soren Kierkegaard, though I can't pretend to be like a well-read philosopher. I'm not, but I do, I am kind of familiar with, the basics of the movements. And I think that when you're, especially when you're, a teenager, which, these characters are supposed to be, or like they're like late teens, um, there's a lot of these big questions we're asking ourselves. And I think the older we get, like the less likely we are to pose those like, what's life, man, kind of questions.
yeah,
Because like I think the older we get, the more we think, oh, well, I'm supposed to have this figured out. And if I ask these questions, then people are going to know I don't. But the real secret of life, coming from a 23-year-old, so what do I know? Is that I think we don't have it figured out, and we're all just winging it. And I mean, that's kind of the beauty of it. And so, but I think it's just kind of this
yeah,
idea of like questioning everything, like this Cartesian doubt. And then I
yeah.
also just love the idea of this kind of like, kind of goofy, not too serious character, like who's like probably a stoner, also
Oh
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
quoting Kierkegaard off the
Oh
top of
yeah,
his head, and like I think it was just weird and funny. And actually, Catherine Curtin loved that. She was like,
yeah,
I love the Kierkegaard quotes, like so weird.
yeah.
Um,
No, no, I did love your character. I think the first
thank you.
shot we see of him, he's doing Edward Forty Hands
Yeah,
or
he is.
something, and then,
He is. He
right.
is.
So yeah, no, I did definitely love that character.
Good.
All right, before I let you go, I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Is there a takeaway from this film that you would like folks to get? Do you have anything that you want to share about this film more specifically?
Great question. Aside from the fact that it's world premiering on September 22nd at 8:45 p.m. At the Calgary International Film Festival, and then also it's the 25th. In terms of, takeaways, I think that there are really like there are two ways to watch the film, and I'm not going to give any like direct takeaway because I'm much more interested in what other people think and how other people experience it. Because, I mean, I'll be there, I'll be in Canada, and there will be a question and answer, and so in those specific circumstances, I can give some, personal insights when I feel appropriate. But on the whole, most people are not going to get that, personalized accompaniment. So I really like the film to stand on its own. But I will say, I think the film can be watched, as a coming of age film, or as like a drama, or, and, obviously it's a coming of age drama, whichever way you cut it. But I think if you just watch it as a story and, don't try to kind of put it into this box of like all the other kind of YA films, young adult, coming of age, because I think that it's not. I mean, I hate to, I hate to sound like I'm not like the other girls, but I think that, and obviously there are some incredible coming of age films, that I just like adore that really do like tread into this subject matter. But it's a dark film. It covers. I mean, I think as Sif said in the write up, it is ultimately hopeful. And but it covers themes of alcoholism, drug abuse, domestic abuse, as well as just kind of like one parent is out of the picture. I mean, it's a tough film, and I think that you have to go into it being like, I think it's also an enjoyable cinematic experience, and there are a lot of points of levity, and I did my very best to kind of not make it just a bummer. And I really don't think that people will leave the theater bummed out. I think that like that's not how I wanted it to end. And I think that the best thing someone can do is just kind of sit down with an open mind, to watch a realistic story about how some people live life, especially how some people, in America live life, because it is a uniquely American story. However way you slice it, it is, it takes place in a very rural American environment with all of the associated problems. And I think that it can both be enjoyed as, someone closer to that age group. I've noticed a lot of people in their 20s to 30s, mid 30s, like really love it. But then I've also noticed that a lot of older people like it as well, because, they pick up on these kind of broader themes that relate, far past Benji. And I'd say that one thing I personally love in the film, and I feel like I'm not answering your question at all either, but one thing I love in the film is the relationships with Benji and women in his life, kind of the prominent women in his life. Rita, his mom, Laura, his the cancer patient who he becomes kind of best friends with, and Catherine, the pretty much only stable, positive presence in his life. And so I really love seeing those interactions and kind of how we are shaped by everyone around us. But is there one takeaway? I don't think so. I don't know.
Not so much that there is an answer being presented, but a reinforcement that it's okay to question, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a coming of age story, yes, but we see these fully grown adults who are also broken, right? Who are also unsure of where they need to be, where they should be, and what they and who they should be, right? So to me, I think if there is a takeaway, it's that it's okay to question, and that you shouldn't expect to have these answers at any age.
Yeah, I think you're so spot on. When I was pitching this film, I would say that while both Laura and Benji are, differently aged and at very different points in their life, they're also kind of going through this same exact things, with some major logistical differences like the cancer. But it's like we have so much more in common than we think. Yeah, let's make that the takeaway. We have a lot more in common than we think.
Amazing. I love it. All right. Benji's Hour. world premiere Friday, September 22nd at 8:45.
Yes, sir.
I'll be there. Hopefully we can
Yeah,
catch up on the red
I would love
carpet and chat a little bit more. But thanks so much for taking the time today.
that sounds absolutely great. Thank you for having me.